The events of January 6, 2021, shook the nation. In the aftermath, a different kind of storm brewed. Thousands of Americans, many simply caught up in the moment, found themselves branded as criminals. They were labeled as insurrectionists, a threat to democracy. But what if there's another side to this story? What if the real injustice isn't the events of that day, but the treatment of those who participated? Across the country, January 6th, defendants languish in prisons, many claiming to be victims of a system rigged against them. They allege horrific conditions, physical abuse, and a blatant disregard for their fundamental rights. Their stories paint a chilling picture, one that should trouble every American who values freedom and justice. These are not hardened criminals, terrorists, or insurrectionists, as the mainstream media would have you believe. They are teachers, veterans, grandparents, ordinary Americans who felt their voices were not being heard. They went to Washington to express their concerns, to peacefully protest, and for that they are now paying a heavy price. The allegations coming out of these prisons are deeply disturbing. Defendants describe overcrowded cells, filthy conditions, and a lack of basic necessities, like adequate food and medical care. Some claim to have been denied access to legal counsel, their pleas for help falling on deaf ears. Reports of physical abuse are even more alarming. Some defendants allege they have been beaten, subjected to sleep deprivation, and placed in solitary confinement for extended periods. These are not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of cruelty and intimidation designed to break their spirits and force them into submission. Imagine being held in a place where your rights are routinely violated, where the guards see you as the enemy, and where hope seems like a distant memory. This is the reality for many January 6th defendants, trapped in a system that seems determined to punish them before they've even had their day in court. Faced with such appalling conditions, many defendants are fighting back, challenging their detentions and alleging violations of their constitutional rights. Their legal arguments center around the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, and the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. They argue that the government has overstepped its bounds, using excessive force and denying them due process. The evidence, they say, is clear, from the disparate treatment compared to other protests to the alleged entrapment by government informants. It all points to a concerted effort to silence dissent and make an example of these individuals. The fight for justice is an uphill battle, but these defendants and their families refuse to be silenced. They are demanding accountability, not just for themselves, but for all Americans. They understand that what happens to them sets a dangerous precedent for the future of our democracy. Behind the headlines and political rhetoric are real people whose lives have been shattered. Consider the case of a young mother, a peaceful protester swept up in the chaos, now separated from her children and facing years behind bars, or the veteran who served his country with honor only to be treated like a traitor for exercising his First Amendment rights. These stories need to be heard. The American people deserve to know the truth about what happened on January 6th and its aftermath. We need to ask ourselves, are we truly a nation of laws, or is justice simply a privilege reserved for the powerful and the politically favored? The fight for justice for the January 6th defendants is about more than just their individual cases. It's about upholding the principles of fairness, due process, and equal protection under the law. It's about ensuring that what happened to them never happens to another American.